Today's program, our programs are filmed, most of them are filmed through the graciousness of our speakers who are willing to share them to the public, and then you get to watch them another time. You know, you can go to sapatv.org and go to the video on demand button, Sapa on Demand, and you, especially today's, you may want to watch this one again and be entertained. And so I want to thank Johnny Gifford in the back, who has been filming them for Sapa TV. He's the executive director of Sapa TV. And today's program actually is being underwritten for Sapa TV by the Framery in Chester. They frame photos, artwork, and they have an art gallery there in Chester. And today, Karen is going to introduce our speaker.
That's better. Today's program features Dan Lindner, otherwise known as Banjo Dan, who will perform several of his favorite songs that he has written in his 50-year career as a professional musician. He will discuss the inspirations and stories behind these songs, which are drawn from Vermont's history, legends, places, and personalities. Dan has played banjo for over 60 years and is largely self-taught. He also plays guitar, mandolin, auto harp, tipple, look that one up in the dictionary, and more. It's T-I-P-L-E, not tipple as to drink too much. He has recorded with all of those instruments, as well as organ, percussion, slide guitar, 12-string guitar, and balalaika. Did I say that correctly? Thank you. Dan has performed throughout Vermont and the Northeast, along with several overseas tours. Over that span, he has recorded some 20 albums, including those by Banjo Dan and the Midnight Plowboys, of which his brother Willie is a member, as well as solo albums under his own name. Under the latter are 4 collections of Banjo Dan's Songs of Vermont. All told, Dan has recorded over 100 original songs, and he is still composing. Dan has also performed with the Vermont Bluegrass Pioneers, the Sky Blue Boys, and Cookie, and the New Bremen Town Musicians. While not a Vermont native, Dan has lived in Vermont for the past 54 years. So in my book, we'll just call him a native Vermonter. He currently lives in Montpelier. Please welcome Dan Lindner.
Thank you very much, Karen, and thank you, Marita, for the invitation. I've spoken at several, I've done these presentations about my songs in several of the OLLI chapters, and I'm particularly pleased. I was always hoping I'd get invited to Springfield. Now, you might wonder why, but as we go on in the program, I think it'll be very obvious. So, and Karen, in that kind introduction, did I write that, or? Yeah. Covered a lot of what I would ordinarily say before I get going. So we're just going to get into the music. There are 4 volumes of Banjo Dan Songs of Vermont. This is really, although I have to admit I'm not a native, I guess I've become known as a Vermont songwriter. Out of 300 plus songs I've written, I feel like some of the best ones are my Vermont songs. I came here, I believe it was 1969. That's about when my songwriting career began, and there's no coincidence. I've found this wonderful place we live so inspiring and fascinating, and just an endless source of, well, as I say, inspiration for the songs that I've been writing. When I first came to Vermont, I was living in Franklin County. I was working in St. Albans, Well, I went into my bank one day and there was this little, I don't have a copy with me, but a little booklet that they were giving away. It was called the St. Albans Raid. Well, I had no idea what that was about, so I picked one up and took it home. Now, you all know about the St. Albans Raid, right? Okay, I don't have to tell you the story. But I was blown away. I couldn't imagine. I thought I knew about the Civil War. I actually grew up in Maryland, and border state. I didn't know about Civil War action right here in little old Vermont. Up in St. Albans, a couple miles from the border. So it just really took me by surprise and really made a big impression. And eventually, I wrote a song called the St. Albans Raid. I'm sure it was the first historical song that I wrote. I have written many songs about things that actually happened in Vermont, and we'll be getting to some of those after a while. But that was the first one. And here's the thing, I got this little booklet, right? 22 pages, fine print, all about the raiders, how they infiltrated from Canada and were trying to draw attention and resources away from the South where most of the war was being fought. And just all kinds of information about who they were, what they did, how they shot up the town, robbed all the banks, dashed across the border into Canada. Well, here's a challenge. 22 pages of fine print and all this information. I'm going to try to make it into a song of my style of music, basically bluegrass or country, folk, whatever you want to call it. A song that might run 3.5 minutes. So this is a challenge to cook all that information down into a few verses, and along with some instrumental solos. So it's a challenge that I've really embraced and really sort of made a career of. Especially these story songs. And I managed to, I hope, capture the essence of the story and tell it in a few short verses. One of the ways I was able to do it is I played it really fast. Anyhow, that song is featured on my first album of Vermont songs, which is this one here. I don't know if you can see it, but it's called I'll Take the Hills. And the St. Albans Raid is on there. As we go through the program today, I'll be telling you about a few of the songs, and I'll be singing a few for you. I'd like to sing the title song, I'll Take the Hills. After living in Franklin County for just 2.5 years, I quit my job, which I hated, and moved to Marshfield in Washington County. An old friend, a college friend, Al Davis, and I bought some property together. Al is a wonderful songwriter himself, great singer, and he and I had a band together for 40 years. So we were living, this is early 70s, right? Back to the land, living the good life. Remember that? Hippies, we grew our hair long. So we were living in this beautiful 100 acres, mostly woods and clear land, a nice view of the hills out there. And Al built a house out of a restored chicken barn, and my house was built out of old barn beams and boards that I scrounged up here and there. But we had a good life there. We were cutting all our own firewood and raising a big garden and chickens and pigs and all that sort of stuff. And it was a scene that I wanted to capture, and eventually wrote the song called I'll Take the Hills, which I will sing for you. And let me mention, aside from doing these OLLI presentations, I have never been a solo performer. It's just not my thing at all. But what you get today is just me and my guitar or the banjo or something. I've always surrounded myself by other musicians. That's how I feel that my songs can be best presented. And for this song, I'll Take the Hills, I had my friend Al sing it. He has a very rich, resonant voice, just perfect for this song, which mine is not, but too bad. Can you hear this out there? Is that okay? When the labor's done, I stand and listen. That's the wrong key. That's the problem. That's why I couldn't get it. when the labor's done, I stand and listen to the silence all around. There's not a sound in the setting sun, only the robin's song drifting through the trees. On a gentle breeze, I'll take the hills and the valleys full of sunshine. I'll take the long days working with my hands. I'll take the fields and the forest in the moonlight. I'll take my chances living from the land. There's an ebb and flow and a rhythm to the seasons of the year. My choice is clear, for I've come to know, when you work within the natural scheme of things, what joy it brings. I'll take the hills and the valleys full of sunshine. I'll take the long days working with my hands. I'll take the fields and the forest in the moonlight. I'll take my chances living from the land. To each his own. Let the great ambitions drive the great men on. From dawn to dawn, I'll stay at home, and I'll just tend my little peaceful plot of earth. For all it's worth, I'll take the hills and the valleys full of sunshine. I'll take the long days working with my hands. I'll take the fields and the forest in the moonlight. I'll take my chances living from the land. So that's I'll Take the Hills. Thank you. As I said, I had Al sing that. He's much better for that particular song. Around the time this album, I'll Take the Hills, came out, there was they were looking, I don't know who they was, Department of Tourism perhaps, anyhow, looking for a new Vermont state song. So of course I submitted this one, right? Have you ever heard it as a state song? No. I got a really nice letter back from Madeline Cunin. She said, Dan, I love this song. I play it. This came out on a cassette. I have the cassette in my car. I play it all the time. But the word Vermont is not in there. So this does not qualify. Too bad. Okay. There's another song on this collection that I would like to sing for you. It's a song that really is very important to me, and it's called Old Dan. Now, it's not about me. When I wrote the song, I was young Dan. I mean, this is, right? When did this come out? 1987, yeah, long time ago. It's a song about a team of workhorses. And I was always struck by how, if you go to the county fairs and everything, the horses are named Tom and Dick and Bob and Duke and, names like that. And Dan. So I thought that was pretty cool. So I wrote the song. It was inspired by a team of horses that was working on a farm near where I was living in Marshfield. The reason the song is important to me has nothing to do with the name, Old Dan. It's because I've gotten more feedback on this particular song from people who said that they found it moving, it touched them in some way, they resonated with them, whatever. And I can tell you I'm not writing and performing Vermont songs to get rich. That doesn't work that way. But if I get some feedback like that from people who have gotten something from my songs, I guess that's sort of the payback. So maybe you'll get an idea why this song has sort of stayed with a lot of people, or maybe it won't, but we'll find out. This is called Old Dan. Now I want to get it in the right key this time. This is not working too well. It's a morning full of sadness. My eyes are wet with tears. Old Dan won't be hitching up today. And Tom's out in the barnyard, just standing all alone, his weary head hung down as if to say, it's a heavy load to haul, and I don't know as I can make it without the one I've always had to pull by my side. Seems a long way to climb to that sweet grassy meadow where someday we'll be resting side by side. Day after day for 20 years we hitched up side by side and never saw the load we couldn't haul. And if I ever faltered, well, Dan just pulled the harder. He never seemed to mind the work at all. In the springtime we'd be plowing, in summer mowing hay, then fall was time to fetch the harvest in. Through winter's icy snowdrifts we'd be dragging out the logs till March would bring the sugar time again. And at county fair time, how our golden coats would shine, our harness medals sparkled in the sun. When the pulling contest came, we'd put 'em all to shame. We'd beat the other teams by half a ton. Oh, the peaceful snowy evenings when the work was finally done, we'd shelter in a dark and drafty barn. And Dan would lean his big old shaggy head across my neck. We'd nuzzle close to keep each other warm. It's a heavy load to haul, and I don't know as I can make it without the one I've always had to pull by my side. Seems a long way to climb to that sweet grassy meadow where someday we'll be resting side by side. So come on, Tom, it's getting late. The morning's nearly gone. We can't stand here and reminisce all day. The time has come to hitch up for the hardest job of all, to take old Dan up to his resting place. It's a heavy load to haul, and I don't know as I can make it without the one I've always had to pull by my side. Seems a long way to climb to that sweet grassy meadow where someday we'll be resting side by side. It's old Dan. Thank you, thank you. So I don't know, maybe you can see why that has resonated. I was performing this this song one time. I think it was with my brother. We did a show somewhere, and we did this song, and a guy came up after the program, and he was very emotional. He said, you didn't make up that story about those horses, did you? And I said, well, yeah, I did. I saw this team, and he said, no, you didn't make it up. That's a real story. It happened to me on my farm exactly like that. So he had tears in his eyes. And anyhow, I wrote it about a team of horses, but obviously you can extrapolate. It could be about a team, a pair, a couple, a partnership of any kind, any species, including us. That's old Dan. Let me tell you one more song from the first album, I'll Take the Hills. This is also special to me. It's called The Ghost of Goldbrook Bridge. Now, everybody loves a ghost story, right? And I came across this story in the newspaper quite some time ago. I'm sure it was right around Halloween. And it's a story of a covered bridge across the Gold Brook, which is, I mean, this is a real bridge. It's a real place. It's up there in Waterbury Center, just south of Stowe. And the story is there was a woman named Emily. And she was living with her father on the farm. This would have been maybe, I don't know, 100, 150 years ago. Anyhow, Emily was an old lady. She was a spinster, okay? She was over 30 years old. She should have been married and had a bunch of rugrats, right, by that time. And this is really a humiliation and embarrassment for poor Emily. But lo and behold, at some point, a man came around courting, a man named Donald, and they decided they were in love. They wanted to get married. They asked her father, and he said, no. Seems to me he'd be happy to get rid of this embarrassment of a daughter, but I don't know, maybe she cooked well. Anyhow, he refused to let them marry. Well, so they decided they were going to elope. And Emily sewed a beautiful wedding gown in secret. Her father never knew about it. And they were going to meet at midnight in the covered bridge on a certain night. And so midnight, it was approaching midnight, and Emily sneaks out of the house in her wedding gown, right? She goes to the bridge and goes inside the covered bridge, and midnight approaches, and midnight comes, and Donald doesn't show up, and he isn't there, and I'll just wait for this guy a little. She waits a little while, and he doesn't show up, and she waits, and that son of a gun never does show up. And she's frantic, and the sky starts to get light, and she's thinking, I can't go home now, run through the fields past the neighbors, they'll laugh at me, I'll be embarrassed and humiliated once again. And she hangs herself from the rafters of the covered bridge, which of course has been haunted ever since. My wife Jay and I went to the Goldbrook Bridge one Halloween at midnight. We thought we wanted to see if she would put in an appearance. Well, we didn't see her that night. It doesn't prove anything, right? I mean, just because we didn't see her. This is cool. Just a couple weeks ago, I went to urgent care for something. I don't even remember what it was. And a nurse came in to see me and had a badge on. It says Emily. I said, hey, I like that name. I wrote a song about that. I wrote a song. There's a story about that song. And she said, I didn't say a song. I said, there's a story about Emily. And she says, I know. It's about the Goldbrook Bridge, right? And I said, yeah. How did you know? She said, well, I know that place. I said, well, Jay and I went to look for Emily, and we didn't see her. And this woman said, yeah, but I have. And she went there one night, and she didn't see the ghost in the bridge, but sort of at the far end, she saw this white thing, go past. And she's quite sure that it was Emily, the ghost. I don't know. Anyhow, I really like this recording because I set this up as sort of a dramatic piece, almost like an opera, where different people are singing. And I had my two very favorite singers at the time. The song starts with a man, his car is broken down, he's walking down this dark, lonely road, and he comes to the covered bridge, and he steps inside, and this ghost appears. Of course, it's Emily, and she tells him her story. And so my friend Paul Miller, a wonderful, wonderful singer, I had him sing the part of the man, and my wife Jay, who's quite a marvelous singer, I had her sing the ghost, and she got to go, ooh, in 3-part harmony. And we used a lot of reverb and echo and everything, so that was fun. That's the Ghost of Goldbrook Bridge. The second volume of Banjo Dance Songs of Vermont is this one here. It's called The Catamount is Back, and this is from 1994. That is a sure enough, real live photograph of a catamount, okay? Wait a minute, the catamount is extinct? No. The last catamount officially in Vermont was shot in Barnard, 1881. I see somebody nodding, you know about that. That cat is in a it's all stuffed, it's in a glass cabinet in the Historical Museum in Montpelier. I've been to see that cat. But, as I'm sure many of you know, the reports of sightings of the catamount have continued to come in. The catamount, I meant to say, by the way, is the same species as the mountain lion out west and the Florida panther, so that really is a photo of a catamount. It's taken by Susan Morse from Underhill, a wildlife tracker and expert photographer. Anyhow, but all these sightings, you know, they just haven't been confirmed. The Fish and Wildlife, the game wardens go out and they look, and they're looking for scat and footprints and everything. So the catamount has become a legend. So what the song I wrote has the line, the catamount retreated with a decimated forest to live among the legends of the land. So this song, I'm just gonna sing you the chorus. Did you see something slipping through the shadow of the pine? Did the snow show an awesome set of tracks? Did you hear something screaming like a banshee in the night? And could it be the catamount is back? Well, that's just the chorus. Now, in this case, I think there were 6 verses, 3 double verses maybe. I just decided in this case it would be most effective to have the story, to have the verses narrated, you know, spoken instead of sung. Seemed like a good way to tell the story about how the catamount has supposedly disappeared, but maybe not. And once again, I had my friend Al Davis do the vocal, and in this case, not because I love his singing voice so much, but because in, I think it was 1987, he and a partner founded the very first microbrewery in Vermont. It was called the Catamount Brewing Company. Anybody remember the Catamount Brewing Company? Al used to bring a case of Catamount Pale Ale to our rehearsals. We got a lot of, yeah, we enjoyed it. Anyhow, so I had Al do the vocal on that. He did a really nice job. Okay, so I told you a little while ago that speaking to the OLLI group in Springfield was special to me. And here's the reason. I have a lot of songs that relate, especially my historical story songs, they relate to this part of the state. Now, I've never written a Springfield song. Somebody sent me a folder of all kinds of information and reprints and articles about Precision Valley. Said, you should write a song about this. But I never got around to that, I never did. Too bad. But I do have some songs that are from right around this area, and I'm going to start with one that's from an incident that happened in Rockingham. Now I know we have at least one Rockingham person. Anybody else here from Rockingham or Bellows Falls? Okay, so what am I going to sing about? Or I'm not going to sing. Okay, do you remember? Who remembers the Arch Bridge? All right, yeah. Well, you know what happened. You know the great story about the Arch Bridge. For those few of you who don't, I'll tell you the story real quick, and I hope I get it right. There was a beautiful single standing arch bridge that went from Rockingham over to North Walpole, New Hampshire. I see a lot of people nodding. When I first came to Vermont, it was still standing. It's a beautiful thing. I think people in the valley just loved it. And when they went to take it, Highway Department decided, well, this thing was built in the horse and buggy days, and you know, there's a little bit of rust over there, and we're just not sure it's up for modern traffic, and so they decided they were going to take it down. Anyhow, it's an amazing story, and I read about it in the paper, and this is I think the first case where I said, now wait a minute, okay, there's an article in the paper, right? I want to really learn about this whole thing. And this is before the internet. I couldn't just sit home and type a few things and play with a mouse. At that time, this would have been in the 80s. The best source of information was the state archives and in the pavilion in Montpelier. Microfilm from newspaper articles going back long time. I mean, I had to go back to the early part of the 20th century to research this, but I love doing that. I love really finding out about these amazing events, and I found out, some of you know this, some of you don't, the Arch Bridge was completed in 1905 at a cost of $40,000. They used finest craftsmen available, hemlock, stone, and steel, best materials, and they built this bridge. This is going to last forever and a day. Well, it was a beautiful thing, but as I said, the highway department started scratching their collective head and said, yeah, don't know about this thing. Anyhow, they announced that they were going to tear it down. The experts said, for $6 or $7 million, we can tear this thing down and build a bridge that really will last forever and a day. Modern concrete bridge. Great. And of course, they made this announcement. They're going to blow it up. And the word goes out, and people gather from everywhere, and they set the dynamite charges at the strategic places. I don't know if they went 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, but whatever. Somebody pushed a plunger or pressed a button. Huge explosion, smoke everywhere. Was anybody there when they tried to blow this thing up? Right. Oh, amazing. So the smoke blows off and the bridge is still standing, right? Incredible. And the lyrics I put together after I learned about this: 2 more rounds of high explosives while the experts stood and stared and nothing happened. It's a great story. And of course they weren't about to, the so-called experts weren't about to admit defeat, and they came back the next day. I don't know if did they try and blow it up again the next day? They eventually had to take acetylene torches and cut it down. Very, very unglorious. And so they put in a modern concrete bridge that just, it could be anywhere in the country. Nothing special about it anymore, which is really a shame. And what's the motto?
And now it's closed.
Is it closed? I didn't know that. I went across it maybe half a year ago. Well, okay, but anyhow, nothing to brag home, nothing to put nothing worthy of a postcard, right? So what's the motto? If it ain't broke. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's in the song too. Well, that's about the Arch Bridge. It's a wonderful story, but we miss it, don't we? I'm going to sing you a song from this, from the Catamount. When we were living in Marshfield, out in the country, there was an old road. We called it the Thrown Up Road. It's got nothing to do with indigestion. That's what they call them up there. A class 4 road, a road that's no longer maintained. There's a lot of these all over the state. They just go out through the woods and past farms and where the farms and mills and everything used to be. But this particular road, it was very poignant. We used to like to walk up there, walk the dog, and we found this cellar hole. There's still lilacs between the cellar hole and what's left of the road. There's still lilacs blooming there. Clearly, it was somebody's homestead. Somebody lived there. Children were probably born there, and probably some old folks died there. It's quite and it's so quiet and peaceful now, just out there in the country. We were there one time in the winter. Just happened to raise our eyes in time to see a bobcat running across this snowy field. It's the only time I've ever seen one in the wild. And so I wanted to capture that in a song. So this doesn't tell a story or anything. It just sort of paints a picture, at least it's my attempt, in a song. So this is called The Old Cellar Hole. Oh, after I wrote the melody, I realized it was a melody that would work very well for the banjo, which is my main instrument, and mandolin, which my brother plays. And so we recorded it as sort of half instrumental. You know, the instruments play the melody several times, and then the vocal comes in for just a relatively short passage. And it goes like this. Half a mile's distance down an old abandoned road stood a clearing at a little hillside farm, where people lived and labored on the land to keep a family safe and warm. Oh boy, haven't done this for a long time. Yeah. Let me think about this. Oh yeah. Half miles distance down an old abandoned road, in a clearing by a big old maple tree, wide open to the sunshine and the rain, looking lonesome as can be. There's nothing but a cellar hole where once upon a time is a cabin and a little hillside farm, where people lived and labored on the land to keep a family safe and warm. Now a winter wind is whipping down a lonely mountainside, while the bobcat bounds across the fields of snow, and there's no one to remember how the people lived and died here long ago. Rusted chunks of metal and a few old weatherboards in a pit lined with crumbling blocks of stone. The burdocks and the brambles and the garter snakes have claimed it for their own. Standing in the silence where the children used to play, I can almost hear them laughing once again. The whinny of the horses in the pastures and the shouts of working men. Now a winter wind is whipping down a lonely mountainside, while the bobcat bounds across the fields of snow, and there's no one to remember how the people lived and died here long ago. Now a winter wind is whipping down a lonely mountainside, while the bobcat bounds across the fields of snow, and there's no one to remember how the people lived and died here long ago. It's the old cellar hole. Thank you. One more song on the Catamount album that I'd like to mention to you. It's called The Loon's Necklace. This is a Native American tale. There's a man named Michael Caduto used to go around telling stories at schools and so on, and I know he put at least some of his Native American tales into book form, and I came across this book and got permission to turn it into a song. The story is about a little boy. He's sitting on a boulder by the lake, and he's weeping, he's blind, and he's crying, and the loon swims up to shore. And she says, "Little brave, what are you weeping for?" And he tells her the beauty of the rainbow, and the color of the sky, and the brothers that I can hear and cannot see, and all this stuff. And she says, "Climb upon my feathered back and open wide your eyes and question not the journey that you take." The little boy climbs on the back of the loon, and she dives down, and down again and down again through waters cold as starlight that bathed his eyes and left them clear and clean, till he stood upon that boulder with his eyes as bright as moonlight, gazing out upon a world he'd never seen. The little boy and his mother go along the shore of the lake, and they pick up shells. They gather beautiful shells, and they weave them into a chain, beautiful chain, and they call the loon to shore, and they drape it around her neck, and the shells turn to feathers, and that's how the loon got its necklace. I think it's a beautiful story, and I wanted to make a song out of it, and so I wrote a song called The Loon's Necklace, When I went to record it, I decided we don't need banjos and loud guitars and everything. So the soundtrack, the instrumental accompaniment, is very, very subdued. It's a quiet acoustic guitar and a wooden flute, which has a sort of an ethereal sound. And I got permission from the North American Loon Association to take some clips from a record that they made of loon calls. You know, the yodels and you know what a loon sounds like. It's amazing. And we blended those into the sound, to the instrumental track. And then I had my wife Jay sang it. And the reason one of the reasons this is special to me is because, and she did it as a solo, and I think it's the best vocal performance of any of my songs. So I'm real pleased with that one. And in case I didn't mention it earlier, I've always tried to find the best voice for each song. On some of them, it's me. When I was younger, I thought, oh, I could sing pretty well. That was then. But and a lot of times I found other people whose voices I thought really matched the song. And in this case, it was Jay. Let's see. Okay, good. That's. Let's move along to the third volume. Okay, yeah. Mystery and Memories, Banjo Dan Songs Vermont, Volume 3. Oh, my friend Jean designed the cover. Jean Cannon, in case you don't know it. One heck of an artist. She designed this cover for me. Thank you, Jean. Sort of a collage from some of the songs on there. The phrase "Mystery and Memories" is from the lyrics of a song called "The Witch of Lake Champlain." Now, in the 1990s, I was working as the executive director for the Vermont Youth Orchestra, and basically that meant I did everything except conduct the orchestra, which I couldn't do. I'm not a classical music guy, but one of the many things that I had to do was take care of publications, fundraising letters and concert programs and brochures and so on. And this is before everything. Now they do it all with emails and websites and so on. But this is in the days when we relied on the printed word. Remember that? I do. So I was in my favorite print shop one day, and the guy, their proprietor, knew that I was writing Vermont songs. He said, "Hey Dan, do you know about the Witch of Lake Champlain?" I said, "Not yet." He gave me a folder with some old news reprints from magazines and so on, and it's a great story. One of the first steamships on Lake Champlain was called the Phoenix. The Phoenix, and this would have been middle 19th century when the steamships started coming in. The Phoenix was making a crossing from the New York side over to Vermont, midnight crossing, caught fire, burned to the waterline, sank. A lot of people lost their lives in that incident. Now, how could such a thing happen? Well, there's a lot of different ideas of, one was, well, the boiler was defective, or there's a crack in it, and then the sparks got out and started the fire. That sounds plausible enough. But a lot of people figured it was sabotage. The Phoenix was, as I said, one of the first steamships. The sailing industry had dominated the lake for, a couple hundred years already. Cargo, passengers, everything, freight. And the people in the sailing industry were very threatened by this new technology. Now, I can relate. Steamships, they call them the fire-breathing monsters. There was a lot of resentment. So one theory is that somebody from, a sailor, somebody working in the sailing industry got on there and started the fire. That was never proved, but it was interesting that when they went to evacuate, and they managed to get some people off alive, one of the lifeboats was missing. So was that the getaway vehicle? Who knows? That's theory number 2. Number 3, the Phoenix was cursed by the Witch of Lake Champlain. There's my song. Okay, great story. Well, I was working for the youth orchestra, and I had this idea. Well, what if we put a little classical music in the into this one? And I asked the conductor, "Can you write a score? Can you score a string quartet?" round up some of your best players and put that in here with the song. And he said, yeah, I'll do that. And he did. It was a memorable recording incident, or session, because I'm sitting in one corner of the studio, right, with my banjo, headphones on. My brother's over there with the headphones and a mandolin. We have a guitar, we have a big bass fiddle. And then here's this guy conducting a string quartet, along with a banjo and everything. But it worked. I think it came out well. This was actually the Vermont Arts Council at that time had a grant program. They were offering grants to artists of all kinds, not just musicians, poets, dancers, playwrights, painters, for artists who wanted to expand their artistic horizons. That's how they put it. So I wrote a grant application. Basically, I said, "You give me the money and I'll expand." So they gave me a little grant, and on this album, Mystery and Memories, there's a handful, not all the songs by any means, but there's a handful of songs where I did bring in other styles, like string quartet on the Witch of Lake Champlain. There's a song called Black Cemetery. I'm a huge fan of old cemeteries, and there's this little cemetery near Montpelier where I went and wrote down all the inscriptions that I could, read this and reading, learn your fate, all that sort of stuff, and wrote a bunch of verses. And I got an unaccompanied vocal quartet to do that one. So that was something different. I had the good fortune and the privilege of traveling to the Soviet Union and then later to Russia on several occasions with cultural exchange programs, and made it a point to learn a lot about Russian traditional music. And so I wrote one of my songs. It's actually about the Underground Railroad, but I wrote it in the style of Russian traditional songs. There's a tradition there where two women will be lifelong partners, singing partners. But the way they sing harmony is very distinctive. They start on one note, and then one voice goes high, one voice goes low, in this very unusual harmony. And at the end of a verse or a passage, they come back together. And I wrote the song with that vocal style, and managed to find some professional Russian musicians in Providence, Rhode Island. So we went down there to record that one. And then maybe my favorite, and these are all on Mystery and Memories, but perhaps my favorite is a song called the Pontiac Yodel. It's a yodel song. You might think it's a Western song, but it's not. It's a Vermont song. But for that one, I got some Dixieland guys. I got a couple trombones and a clarinet, just playing along. I was playing the guitar and singing it. So that was a lot of fun. So, all right, we're on Mystery and Memories. First song is about an unsolved murder. Up the river a little ways, town called Newbury. Who killed Orville Gibson? I saw a headline in the paper, and it was close to the 50th anniversary. This event happened in 1957. This farmer named Orville Gibson was killed. Nobody ever figured out how, who, why, when it happened. So when I wrote the song, based mostly on this newspaper article that I read, the lyrics had the phrase, "After nearly 50 years, nobody knows." Well, that was 2006 when this album came out, and now it's 2020. Now it's more like 70 years or so, and it's still unsolved. The second song on the album is based in Cavendish. We got any Cavendish folks here today? No? Nobody from Cavendish? Well, that's this part of the state, right? It's not too far away. So what did I write a song about based in Cavendish? The man with a hole in his head, right? Yeah. Not Orville Gibson, what am I saying? Phineas Gage. If you don't know the story, you're about to hear it. But I think most people know about this story about the railroad worker, Phineas Gage. I recorded this one, well, I mean, a lot of these songs I'm playing banjo, have a different guitar player, but the banjo is not as good as a guitar for accompanying songs. They don't have the low end and the full chords and everything. But I'm going to play this one on the banjo anyhow, just for a change. And usually the banjo is played in a 2/4 rhythm. You know, I come to Louisiana with a banjo on my knee, all that stuff. But this one is in a 3/4 time, and it's a fast 3/4 time. And nobody plays the banjo in a fast 3/4, which is why I did it. And I'll try after that guitar playing. I hope my fingers will move. Anyhow, this is Phineas Gage. That's about the best I can do here. Phineas Gage had a hole in his head, and everyone knew that he ought to be dead. Was it fate or blind luck? Though it never came clear, he kept keeping on year after year. Now Phineas Gage was a prince of a man, a hard-working foreman, the best in the land, resourceful, respectful, responsible too, pride of the railroad and crew. September 13 was a fine autumn day. The crew was in Cavendish, working away, drilling and blasting and laying the track across the Green Mountains and back. But something incredible happened that day when Gage was distracted and turning away, and his tamping rod slipped down the hole he had drilled. It's a miracle he wasn't killed, for it struck on the ground, it threw off a spark, and the gunpowder down in that hole went off with a roar, and that big iron rod was blasted right up through his skull. And Phineas Gage had a hole in his head. Everyone knew that he ought to be dead. Was it fate or blind luck? Though it never came clear, kept keeping on year after year. Poor Phineas lay in a heap on the ground, and they knew he was gone as they gathered around. But he sat up and started to talking instead, with a big bleeding hole in his head. And he rode in an ox cart with nary a groan. Arriving in town, he got out on his own, stepped up on the porch, took a chair and sat down as the townspeople gathered around. And the doc come a-running and took off his specs, said, Mr. Gage, better cash in your checks. Well, it's time you quit talking and learn how to pray. You'll be meeting your maker today. Those medical fillers did all they could do. Not one of them reckoned he'd ever pull through. But a couple months later, well, glory to God, old Phineas was back on the job. But something had changed and he didn't last long. He was loud and profane, just could not get along. And his friends turned away, saying one thing's for sure, old Gage isn't Gage anymore. So he worked a few odd jobs on farms and in town, caught on with a sideshow and traveled around. But that big iron rod was his only true friend, going with him wherever he went. A medical miracle, Phineas Gage ended up down in Chile, driving a stage, lived 11 more years, missing part of his brain, till the day of his reckoning came. There's a strange looking skull and a big iron rod down at Harvard, they're still on display. And the students and brain people all the world around study the case till this day. Cause Phineas Gage had a hole in his head, and everyone knew that he ought to be dead. Was it fate or blind luck? Though it never came clear, he kept keeping on year after year. There you go. My wife had a long and distinguished career as a school nurse, and she brought home a book from the school library one time. This grotesque picture of a skull with a big hole in it and this iron rod sticking through it. She said, you have to write a song about this. And I said, no way. But I sat down and read the book. 10 minutes later, I'm walking around, man, Phineas Gage had a hole in his head, and everybody knew he ought to be dead. So after Mystery Memories was released, and this was really in the heyday of the compact disc, and it got around the country pretty well, and apparently overseas, because I got it was probably an email, might have been a letter, I'm not sure any longer, from Professor Malcolm Macmillan of the University of Sydney in Australia, a neuroscientist considered the world's foremost authority on the Phineas Gage case. And he said, I love the song, and and we had a correspondence going for a while, and he said, you know, we're still studying this case. I mean, this really is a very significant case in neurobiology. They already knew that, you know, you could trace the brain to vision and locomotion and everything, but nobody knew that certain sections of the brain had something to do with personality and behavior. And in fact, Phineas Gage was a, you know, fine, upstanding citizen until he lost part of his prefrontal lobe on the left side. That rod went in under his left cheekbone, came out the top of his head, took a lot of gray matter with it. And his personality changed. So it was a really important case. I also heard from the British Broadcasting Company, they were doing a science program about brain science and especially about the Phineas Gage case. And so they wanted to play the song on the BBC. I said, yeah, sure, why not? Go for it. Okay. Anybody here from Chester? All right, good. You know about the Phantom, right? Oh, this is an interesting story. Oh, wow, you don't know about the Phantom. Huh. The Phantom burglar haunted from about 1886 to 1902. There's a series of burglaries in Chester, and they just went on, and people were really getting, as we would say these days, freaked out, because some of them didn't make any sense. But no matter how many padlocks and bars and chains and, you know, night watchmen and everything were added to try to protect all the stores and the businesses and warehouses, these burglaries kept happening. And they called the perpetrator, they called him the Phantom. Oh, the Phantom comes at night, and he comes without a light, leaving all the local constables perplexed. If you live in Chester town, then you better hunker down, 'cause you never know where he'll be striking next. In a peaceful little village in Vermont, just the kind of place you'd like to raise your kids. When those burglaries began, not a woman, not a man could believe such things could happen, but they did. Every business, every merchant, every businessman in town came to live in fear of heading home at night. All padlocks, bars, and chains only added to the game. A good challenge was the Phantom's chief delight. Soon a wave of panic swept across the town, for the seeds of suspicion had been sown. And the good folks down in Chester had to wonder if the criminal could be one of their own. Oh, the Phantom comes at night, and he comes without a light, leaving all the local constables perplexed. If you live in Chester town, then you better hunker down, 'cause you never know where he'll be striking next. Clarence Adams was a deacon in the church, and the #1 select man in the town. So the folks all felt relieved when he told them, I believe, I'm the man that's gonna track that villain down. For he'd studied every case of Sherlock Holmes, every crime of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Though he did all he could do, followed up on every clue, seems that the Phantom just got bolder every night. Then one evening from a window at the mill, a shotgun blast returned o'er the land, and the booby-trap had finally nailed the Phantom. Ha! You guessed it, Clarence Adams was the man. Clarence Adams staggered home and then collapsed, and the doctor found his legs a bloody mess. When they searched the house and woods, found him full of stolen goods, old Clarence had no choice but to confess. So the Phantom burglar mystery had been solved, but the locals found it hard to understand How a leader in the town, the most respected man around, turned out to be the state's most wanted man. You might think he'd be remorseful or contrite, but the jury heard his voice swell up with pride. Just like my all-time hero, Dr. Jekyll, I've nursed both the good and evil side. Oh, the phantom comes at night, and he comes without a light, leaving all the local constables perplexed. If you live in Chestertown, then you better hunker down, 'cause you never know where he'll be striking next. The Phantom. Yeah, that really happened in Chester. They had the Pinkertons, they had detectives from all over the country trying to figure this guy out. Well, he was eventually nailed by that booby trap. Clarence Adams was sentenced to a term at the state prison in Windsor, went off to serve his sentence. Apparently he was a model prisoner. He was a gentleman of sorts, very well educated, well spoken. Never gave anybody any trouble. He donated a large collection of his own books to start a prison library, one of the first in the country. So aside from his nasty little habit of breaking into places and stealing stuff, I guess he's a pretty good guy in some sense. Well, he was there. He wasn't there too long. I'm not sure how long it was. There was an epidemic of pneumonia that went through the prison. And this was a deadly strain of pneumonia. People were dropping dead. People were dying right and left in the prison. And it sort of puts you in mind of the pandemic that we, those in this room, somehow managed to survive. And as you'll recall, that was particularly dangerous and deadly in places where people were really concentrated. Prisons, schools, churches, hospitals. And so that was the case in the Windsor prison. Clarence Adams was found in his cell one morning, totally unresponsive, didn't seem to be breathing. He was put on a stretcher, taken to the infirmary. One doctor working 20-hour days, people dying right and left. The doctor was just overworked, exhausted, could hardly keep his eyes open. They bring Clarence Adams in a stretcher. He takes a quick look and says, "Another dead one, get him out of here." They took him, put him in a box, took him to the undertaker. Box goes in the ground, end of story. But it's not. Right? Do you know that story? About a month later, Clarence Adams is reported seen live and well in Montreal, doing just fine. Well, what's all that about? Remember, he's a very intelligent, very well-read. He read all the Sherlock Holmes and the crime stories, but he was also interested in a lot of scientific topics, one of which was mesmerism, an early term for hypnosis. And he apparently was very enthralled with this concept. And so there is some thought that he became adept at self-hypnosis, put himself into a trance, went to this poor overworked doctor, pronounced dead, escaped Windsor prison in a pine box. Could be. He did show up in Montreal after all. The Undertaker, yeah. The Undertaker was this guy who was always in financial trouble. He couldn't handle his finances. He had debts that he couldn't pay, going back years and years. Well, all of a sudden, after that box goes in the ground, the Undertaker can pay off all his debts. And he's living just fine. So that might tell you something. Also, Adams was a bachelor. He had no relatives in Vermont. He had some distant relatives somewhere out of state. Those people were contacted. Permission was requested to dig up that coffin and see who, if anyone, was buried in it. Permission denied. So they never did. So there's old Clarence living up there in Montreal. Now, to me, this whole thing is every bit as fascinating as the story of the Phantom Burglar. It's like Chapter 2, the sequel, right? Naturally, I wanted to write a song, and I wanted to, I mean, it occurred to me just write this second song about the, about how he got out of prison and all, and put it as a sequel to the Phantom song, which I just sang for you. And by the time I collected all this information and put it together, I didn't have the time or the energy. I didn't have the money to, because I produce most of my own albums, to write the song, refine it, arrange it, round up the musicians, rehearse, go back to the studio. So that didn't happen. Too bad. But I never forgot the story. And several years later, I did write the song about this second episode. And I filed it away in a notebook in a little lockbox with the rest of my so-called life's work, along with a few other 100 songs which never should see the light of day. But well, that's true. They can't all be winners. But I decided, hey, I'm going to be... Chester's right up Route 11, right? I mean, we're pretty darn close. I thought it'd be a lot of fun to bring the song here today. It's never been recorded. It's never been performed. Well, I dug the song out and I looked at it and said, yeah, okay, I can tell the story pretty well. And I started singing it and I said, no, this is not okay. It was another song, in a minor key, sort of spooky, sounded like too much like, I have enough songs about ghosts and unsolved murders and graveyards and so on. So I decided if I'm ever going to do this song, I'm going to have to completely rewrite it. Well, as I said, the lyrics seemed okay. But the song is in the first person. My name is Clarence Adams. So it's a happy song, right? It doesn't want to be in a minor key and all spooky. So I wrote a brand new melody just about a week ago, and maybe I can remember it. It's in a major key. It's sort of a jaunty jig rhythm. And I'm going to try it out on you. Nobody's ever heard this, mind you. My name is Clarence Adams, the truth to you I'll tell, and those that call me criminal don't know me very well. You're looking for a motive, I'll tell you one and all. I did it for the thrill of matching wits against the law. They haul me off in shackles, my sentence for to serve 10 years in Windsor prison, hardly all that I deserve, for terrorizing Chester, the town where I was born. No more the famous phantom, just a prisoner forlorn. A dreadful epidemic went reaping through the land, that prison like a charnel house with death on every hand. With panic and confusion, the order of the day, the perfect opportunity to make my getaway. At 5 a.m. I laid me down, slipped into a trance. At 6 o'clock the doc pronounced me dead with just a glance. By 7 I was on my way, stretched out in a box. Goodbye to Windsor Prison, all your bars and chains and locks. My friend the undertaker was a man of chronic debt. A little money change in hands that's never hurt me yet. I don't know who they buried in that grave beneath the tree. The stone says Clarence Adams, that's good enough for me. So now you've heard my story, there's nothing left to tell. To all you folks in Chester, I bid a fond farewell. I'm living like a prince up here in Montreal. I guess the phantom burglar gets the last laugh. After all, you heard it here. Nobody will ever hear that song again, I guess. Oh well. I just had fun with that. I recorded one final volume, fourth volume of Banjo Dance Songs of Vermont. It's called The Sleeping Sentinel. I'm sure you all know the story of the Sleeping Sentinel, our most famous Civil War soldier. He's the one who fell asleep on guard duty. He was found sleeping at his post, arrested, court-martialed, found guilty of desertion, sentenced to death by firing squad. His buddies got up a petition, took it across the river. They were just across the Potomac from Washington. They took it to President Lincoln, who granted a pardon. They run back to Camp Meade. This poor soldier is standing on the parade ground, blindfolded, with a firing squad, right, waiting to hear the word fire. And instead he hears this pardon from President Lincoln. It's a wonderful story. I thought I'd write a song about it. So once again, I figured I better do some research. I referred to a lot of books on the Civil War. The story's been told many times, but I found this is Private William Scott from Groton, Vermont, a farm boy. I won't say he's never been out off the farm, but I'm sure he was never out of Vermont. He's just, this guy, he signed up. We had a lot of people volunteering when the call went out, and he ends up down at Camp Meade, outside of Washington, in Virginia. It's hot as blazes. He's, suffering from all the drilling and everything, and he volunteers for extra duty, and that's how he ended up working a second night on guard duty when he fell asleep. But beyond that, he went back to his unit. He became the model soldier. It's a man with a second life, right? He's a big, strong, strapping fellow. He was always volunteering, doing the hard jobs, helping people out, and he was just 6 months later. There was a skirmish across a creek in Virginia, and he was Private Scott was running out across this creek and grabbing wounded Union soldiers and trying to get them back behind lines for medical treatment. And he was scaling up this bank and with a wounded soldier on his back, and he was shot down. And so he really died a hero's death. Well, this is way more than I can put in one song. I ended up writing a series of songs and spoken in fragments and spoken passages and little instrumental interludes and so on, and putting the whole thing together in something that I call the Sleeping Sentinel Suite. And so that's really the focal point of my fourth album from 2016, yeah, Sleeping Sentinel. That's a photograph of this plaque standing along the highway in Groton, Vermont. Well, the Sleeping Sentinel Suite took up about half an album worth of space and time, so I had room for a few more songs. This will probably be the last one I'll sing for you. Anybody here? Oh, we have at least one person here from Wethersfield, right? Oh no, I'm sorry. That was Rockingham. All right. How about Wethersfield? Yeah. Okay. So what am I going to sing about? Romaine Tenney. Right? Yeah. Okay. I heard about this old farmer, Romaine Tenney. If you don't know about him, well, I'll sing the song. And I think I've pretty much captured the story of what happened to Mr. Tenney. Let me just sing it for you. I used to have a neighbor, Romaine Tenney was his name. He worked the place with horses, all his kin had done the same. On down by Mount Escutney on a rocky piece of land. A few old cows, a wood stove, and a simple happy man. The interstate was coming, it was 1964. A modern world, a faster world was knocking at our door. A man came by with money, said the homestead had to go. The document said vacate, but old Tenney, he said no. This property's my birthright, and it's here I'll make my stand. Take your money, take your papers, boy, and get off of my land. Won't be no big old highway here as long as I'm alive, and I aim to stay right here until I die. The governor was for it, it was gonna change Vermont. It's just a thing for commerce, it's the very thing we want. If some folks are dislocated, that's the price we'll have to pay. It's progress, it's a common thing, you can't stand in its way. The old time. The old codger's just a nuisance, he's stubborn as a mule. He doesn't really mean it, why he'd have to be a fool. But the day they brought the dozers was the day the old man died. Set fire to the farmhouse and he locked himself inside. Now the interstate's a fact of life we couldn't live without. We take it all for granted as we madly dash about, and there's very few remember how one man stood his ground. A simple man who kept his word instead of backing down. This property is my birthright and it's here I'll take my stand. Take your money, take your papers, boy, and get off of my land. Won't be no big old highway here as long as I'm alive. By God, I'll stay right here until I die. Roaming tenant. After this album, The Sleeping Sentinel, came out, I was contacted by the Historical Society from Wethersfield, and they were putting on a celebration of Mr. Tenney's life, and they wanted me to come down and sing that song. My brother and I work as a duo, the Sky Blue Boys, and that song is in our repertoire. So he said, sure, we'd be honored to come down and be part of the ceremony, and we did, and it was really quite wonderful. A lot of people spoke, and they shared their memories of this old gentleman farmer who, you know, he could do without electricity. He didn't have a car. I mean, he milked his cows by hand, and he was very beloved in the community. So we sang the song. We met some of the people. We actually met a couple of his relatives, and that was very special to be part of that. Just today, I was aware that at the interstate rest stop there at exit 8, they've put up a plaque about Mr. Tenney, about Romaine Tenney, and I had not seen it, so I stopped by there on my way down and took a look. It's nice enough. There are a couple good photographs. This old fellow with a big beard, you know, this old-fashioned house. They didn't really tell the story of how he locked himself in the farmhouse and burnt it down. So I think they sort of shortchanged and they sort of sanitized things a little bit. But that's a real Vermont tragedy, and I think a very special story. That's the 4 volumes of Banjo Dance Songs of Vermont. Very quickly, I'll mention, I did one more album recently. I had been writing a lot of spiritual songs, and I wanted to collect them on an album. And in the style of music I play, bluegrass or country, folk music, there's a tradition of gospel songs. And these are songs with biblical themes. But that's not what I was writing. I have written a few of those, and a couple of them, I guess, and recorded them. But I was writing songs with all kinds of spiritual messages and settings. Rest assured, Jesus is in there on one song, but so is the Buddha, so is the Hawaiian goddess of the volcano, so is the Greek mythology, the story of Pandora. So there's a lot of stuff in there, a lot of variety and different styles also. But one final song that has a local, I'm not going to sing it, but I'll just tell you, that has a local connection. Grafton, that's not too far from here, right? Any Grafton people? All right, just up the road a little bit. You probably already know I'm a big fan of old cemeteries. I love to go see this, find the Civil War soldiers, and the one down in Wardsboro. Can't remember the guy's name, Sergeant so-and-so, member of the Boston Tea Party. There's all kinds of great stuff in old cemeteries. And at the Burgess Cemetery in Grafton, there is the stone of Rebecca Park. I had been learning about some of the old Vermont cemeteries, and Rebecca's tombstone has 13 soul effigies. And if you don't know, there's this sort of little moon shape, there's these little faces, very primitive in the early stones. Later they're sort of fancied up, but they represent the souls of the departed. There are 13 of them on Rebecca Stone, and then the stone next to her, I don't know if it's her husband. Anyhow, there's one. She had 14 children that died in childbirth or soon after. And she only lived to the age of 40. She was worn out. So, yeah, she was. And it's very poignant, and it's worth a visit, the Burgess Cemetery, Rebecca Park. And I wanted to write a song about her, and not so much, oh, this is a tragedy, this poor woman, just sort of honor her life and the way that she lived it. So the song is called Rebecca's Lament. That's all I'm going to tell you about. All the songs that I've spoken about or tried to sing are on some of the CDs. Some of the early albums were, 12-inch discs and then cassettes and all, but I've had them all converted to CD format. So they're over there, and I put little cards saying which of the songs are on some of the albums. And if you're interested, you can go put your $15 in the box, make your own change. I'm not going to be over there running a store, but those are available. You can sign up for my mailing list if you want. I am still performing, at least for a little while. I might retire before long because I'm getting long in the tooth, but I can still play and sing a little bit, and there's some business cards. Anyhow, that's it. If anybody has, I don't know if you have time for questions.
Will you take questions? Does anybody have a burning question?
I will be here hanging out, and if you want to talk to somebody, I've already had somebody tell me about a concert, a show I did in this area, about 40 years ago. So I'll be around, be happy to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming out to the program.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. And we will see you in 2 weeks for Martha Green. And in the meantime, have a happy Thanksgiving. Glad you came.